I will start by sharing the screen for my presentation. Uh, right. Um, okay, so thank you very much for the opportunity to share with the potential applicants for our programs. One of the most important topic, which is writing of a research proposal. The research proposal is an integral part of the application, especially for the doctoral programs. And therefore, it forms the basis on which your application will be evaluated. So it is very important that you write a very good proposal. Now, why is a proposal important for the selection process into the postgraduate or into the doctoral program or a degree? Firstly, the panel would want to assess if you are able to write. Remember, doctoral programs are conducted through the writing of chapters and eventually of a thesis. So therefore, at the end of the day, for you to be successful in the writing of a doctoral thesis, you will need to have some writing skills. And secondly, what they want to see in your writing is whether you are able to synthesize the ideas or you are able to argue systematically. Remember, the academic writing is different from just writing a letter or just writing a novel. You've got to demonstrate that you are able to support systematically your arguments and you are able to synthesize your ideas into a very coherent, robust and critical writing. So this is very important. Also, with the research proposal, the panel would want to assess the knowledge of your research. Probably people who are applying for doctoral programs have already done previous postgraduate studies, like for example in the UK context, you should have done an honors degree. In some instances, in some cases, you should have gone through a master's degree already. So therefore, they want to assess the level of your research knowledge before you can be admitted into the program. Very important also, there are other skills that are also very critical for a PhD scholar, which are like the critical thinking, the problem solving, communication, and so on. So all these skills are being tested into a research proposal. So now what I'm going to do, I will go through all the different components of a research proposal and tell you how you should go about doing them and why they are important. So the first one is before you can write any research proposal, you need to have a researchable topic or a researchable idea. Now, where do you get this idea? Or you just sleep and wake up and say, oh, I want to investigate this, I want to research this. No, there is a systematic way in which you will be able to come up with a researchable topic. Firstly, you have to read a lot. You have to read. Say, for example, you want to investigate something about intelligence, or you want to investigate something about maybe human emotional intelligence. Therefore, you have to read very widely and know what has been researched in the area and which of the areas have not been researched. Because if you are going to write a good research proposal, it must demonstrate that you have read very broadly into the literature and you have been able to identify where the gaps are. And then again, also a researchable topic must present itself as a problem, for example, or a challenge to be solved. The purpose of a doctoral study is to present something in such a way that it can help us solve a particular social or socioeconomic problem. So it is very important that you don't just think of a topic, you think of a topic that can actually solve a problem. And number three is that at the end of your proposal, we must be able to see that this is going to be an innovation. This is going to be a creativity. This is going to be a new discovery. What is a new discovery in innovation? An innovation and a discovery, it's something that very few people have done. So if you are going to enroll for a doctoral program, your proposal must demonstrate that you have looked at something quite very novel, quite very innovative, which is your creation and your discovery. And it's very important. So if you are going to write a good research proposal, it is important that you have to sort of be able to add to a new discovery. Now, I'll firstly start now, after you have got an idea, this idea must be sort of structured into a title. Now, a title is a statement about the research that you want to conduct. So the title will usually contain two constructs that you want to measure. And I'm giving you an example there. For an example, if you want to conduct a research for example, in intelligence or life satisfaction, those will be the constructs in the title. So the title will usually contain two constructs. For an example, you can say, what is the relationship between student motivation and academic achievement? What are the two constructs in the title? Will be student motivation and academic achievement. So usually the titles of the research usually contains one or two constructs that are to be measured. And then when you write the title of your proposal, it should not be more than 15 words. It should not be more than 15 words. And it should usually provide where and with whom the study will be conducted. For example, I'm giving an example there. Exploring the relationship between motivation and scholastic achievement of school learners in Astana. So I'm just giving an example. So when you look at that title, it has got two constructs, which is motivation and scholastic achievement. And it also has who, which are the secondary school learners. And then it has got where, which is Astana. So it is very important that all these components are there in your title. Now, once you've got the title, then you've got to problematize the whole study. Now, what is a problematization? We call it a problematization. What is a problematization? You have to provide what we call a problem statement. Now, often students think a problem statement is just one sentence. It is not one sentence. It is a narrative description of what the problem is. It is called a problem statement. So it will be a paragraph. It will not just be a statement. And then how do you problematize an issue? So for example, I said we want to explore the relationship between scholastic achievement and motivation, for an example. You've got to go into the literature and look at what are the statistics saying, statistics in the literature saying about emotional intelligence and scholastic achievement. You've got to look at the previous research and studies that were conducted by other researchers. You've got to look at the sharing your personal experience and observation. Sometimes you want to conduct a particular research and you are, for example, a school teacher. There are certain observations that we have made. So therefore, these observations have prompted you to think about conducting a research in this particular topic. This is what we call, in scientific terms, serendipity or accidental discovery. It's called serendipity. Serendipity means that you have accidentally discovered something and you want to know more about it. So therefore, your experiences and your observations can also be part of the problematization or writing of a problem statement. Also, you can get some information from what are the newspapers saying about this? What are the political speeches of the political leaders in a country saying about this? Like, for example, the Ministry of Education or the Minister of Health or whatever the relevant ministry in that field. What is the government policy saying about it? For an example, in terms of education, for example, you could look at the education laws, you could look at the education policies. So therefore, the problem statement is a narrative about what the problem is. And to support your problem statement, you've got to use statistics, you've got to use the previous research and studies, you've got to share your personal experience and observation, and therefore you write a paragraph about what a problem is. This is very important. And in the panel, they would want to see what the problem is and how you have structured your problem and how the problem has been supported by existing statistics, previous research, your personal experience and observation, and all other information from other sources like newspapers, speeches, and policies, and so on. So that is very critical. Now, once you've got now problematized your study, you will now have to come up with what the main research question of the study is. So the main research question is usually derived from the title. Now, our title earlier on, I said it is exploring the relationship between motivation and scholastic achievement of secondary school learners in Astana. So immediately from there, you are asking the question. The question would be, is there a relationship between motivation and scholastic achievement of secondary school learners in Astana? You can see that your main research question and your title of the title of the study should have the same wording, except for the fact that the main research question is asking a question, but the title puts the statement exploring the relationship. So they should be actually the same. So when I evaluate a proposal, I first look at the title and immediately I go to the main research question. I look at the wording. If it has been properly structured, the wording of the main research question would emulate the wording of the title of the proposal. And therefore, once you've got now the main question, you can also now derive what we call the sub-questions. What are the sub-questions? The sub-questions are those questions that help us to answer the main question. And then for an example here, I said, what is motivation and how is it defined? What is scholastic achievement and how is it conceptualized? So these questions are actually helping us to answer the main research question. So therefore, they are the sub-questions. You can have as many sub-questions as you have, but I usually recommend to students that they should not have more than 5 sub-questions. You must have a moderate number of sub-questions derived from the main question. Now, once you've got your questions, now you've got your main question and you've got your sub-questions. Now you've got to come to what we call the research aim, the purpose and objective. This must come directly from your research questions. So the aim and the purpose is derived from the overarching question. So the aim and the purpose wording, the aim and the purpose of the study will be exactly the same as the wording of the main research question as well as the title. So the title, the main research question, and the purpose and the aim will use probably the same kind of language. But here, for an example, I'm giving an example. The aim of the study is to explore the relationship between scholastic achievement and motivation and scholastic achievement of secondary school learners in Astana. Can you see this wording of the purpose and the aim is the same as the wording of the main research question, is the same as the wording of the title. So this must be linked. Use the same kind of wording. And then you now have to derive the objectives. What are the objectives? The objectives are the things that you want to achieve at the end of your study. And usually the objectives are also derived from both the main research question as well as the sub-questions. The difference is that they have got an action there. For an example, the objective of the study is to describe. Describe means the action that will be taken. Is to establish a relation, whether a relationship exists. So in your objectives here, we want to see the action words. We want to see the action words. So the objectives of the study tell us more about the actions that will be taken in the study to actually produce the results of the study. So the objectives of the study must actually have an action word. And then once you've got now the objectives and you've got your aim, and then you come to the significance of the rationale. What is the significance? Significance is, what is this study going to contribute? What will be knew about the study. And usually the contributions of the study are divided into 3 categories. The study will contribute to theory. If your study is in educational psychology, for example, now we're looking at motivation and scholastic achievement, that area is educational psychology, that's my area. So what contribution does this study do to the theory of psychology of education? So therefore, then it contributes to the literature. It contributes to the knowledge out there that is in the library. This is what we mean by theory. It contributes to the knowledge that is out there in the library. So there must be that contribution. Number 2, what is this study contributing to practice? Now, the study, I'm just exploring whether there is a relationship between motivation and scholastic achievement of secondary school learners in Astana. How will this contribute to practice? It will contribute to practice because if teachers in schools and principals know whether there is this relationship, they would work towards enhancing and making sure that this relationship is promoted, therefore influencing on teacher practices of teaching and learning. That's why we mean the contribution to practice. So it will contribute towards the practices in that field. And therefore, also in terms of the contribution to policy is, for an example, as the Department of, or as the Ministry of Education in Kazakhstan, how do we derive policy in such a way that policy can promote what the study has found? So the study will then make recommendations in terms of the policy statements. What should be there in the policy to enhance what the study is suggesting or the recommendation? So the contribution here, when you discuss the rationale and the significance, you have to talk about these 3 aspects. How will your study contribute to theory? How will your study contribute to practice? And how will your study contribute to policy? They are very, very important. And then the most important part of the proposal, once you've got the significance, then you have now to review the literature. Now here in the proposal, you want to tell the panel what studies have been conducted out there and what are they saying about your topic and what are the gaps. So this is what is very important. And then you also indicate in the literature that how your study will fill these gaps that are left by other literatures. So very important, when you are doing the literature review, make sure that you review the literature that is not older than 10 years, unless this literature is a primary source. For an example, if we are in educational psychology, I can still cite people like George Elport. I can still cite people like Brom from Brenner, because those are the foundational authors in our field. So even if they have written something 50 years ago, it will still be relevant for now because it forms the theoretical basis of our arguments in the field of educational psychology. So therefore, it's very important that I cite them. But then if you cite literature, make sure that the literature that you cite is not older than 10 years. And then you have to make sure that when you write your literature part, it is divided into paragraphs, and therefore it follows the referencing style that is prescribed by the university. Here at Nazarbayev University, all writings must follow the APA 7th edition. The APA is the referencing style that we use. So make sure that you use the referencing and avoid plagiarism. Often when we read the research proposals, students are tempted in copying things on the internet and just pasting it in their proposal and saying this is a literature review. And usually it reads like, oh, so-and-so says this, so-and-so says this, so-and-so says this, so-and-so says this. That is not a literature review. That is a compilation of statements from sources. And therefore you will fail if you write a literature review. You've got to read all the sources. And after reading all the sources, try to summarize by yourself on the notebook. And then after summarizing by yourself on the note, try to write an essay about the literature without looking into books. What does this literature say? And then as you do that, you only acknowledge the ideas that you have taken from the different authors. That's how you avoid plagiarism. But if you are going to write a literature and then you copy statement and paragraphs from the sources, you are going to plagiarize a lot, and that is not recommended. That's not recommended. So I usually say to the students, read all the sources, write your notes about what Makoelle says, what Torano says, what Bridget says, and so on. And after you have done that, you sit down and then you write your literature. Try to think about the ideas that these people were saying in the literature review. You will not be plagiarized anything. And as you go along, you acknowledge that, okay, so-and-so had this idea, so-and-so had this idea. So you're only using the ideas of these people to build your own argument. That's what it's required in a literature review. So, and the literature review must be organized in headings and subheadings. And in each and every paragraph, there must be only one idea. Don't put a lot of ideas in a paragraph. In a paragraph, there must be only one idea. Now, at the end of the literature review, you have now to also indicate the theoretical and the conceptual framework. Now, what is the theoretical and the conceptual framework? I'm saying here, each and every house, when it is being built, no house can be built without a foundation. Now, every study, every research study must have this foundation, either in form of a theoretical or a conceptual framework. Now, a theoretical framework is when you are using an existing theory to set up your arguments for your study. For an example, we are exploring now the relationship between motivation and scholastic achievement. And we can use, for example, the theory of Maslow's hierarchy of needs as our foundation. Maslow's hierarchy of needs talks about the different levels of motivation and what influences motivation. So therefore, we use this theory as a basis, as a foundation for our ideas in the study. But if we don't want to use a theory, we don't want to use Maslow's ideas, we can have what we call the conceptual framework. What is a conceptual framework? Conceptual framework is that we go back to the literature, we look at what the concepts that other authors have used in the literature, and from that we synthesize our own framework. We develop our own framework, what we call the conceptual framework. What is a conceptual framework? The use of different concepts within the literature to build our structure or to build our argument in terms of how we will go about conducting this study. So here, people decide to do either one, not the other. So if they decide to do a theoretical framework, they do a theoretical framework. If they decide to do a conceptual framework, it is highly unlikely that you will use both theory and conceptual framework. People choose to go theoretical path or to conceptual path. So that's how most of the doctoral studies have conducted. Now, after now you have told us what is the foundation of your study, your foundation of your study in terms of the theoretical framework. Now you come to what we call the research methodology. Now the methodology has got three different components. In your proposal, you have to tell us what is a paradigm, what is your paradigm, what is your research approach, and what is your design. I'm going to explain that. The paradigm, every research that is being conducted is like religion. You say, I'm a Judaist, or I'm a Muslim, or I'm a Christian. It's a paradigm. It means any thinking, your thinking is influenced by that fundamental belief or fundamental assumption. So in research, we have different paradigms as well. I'm just making an example with religion because you will understand. If a Christian is arguing from the Bible, if a Muslim is arguing from the Quran, and if I don't know, other religions, like for example, the Buddhist is arguing, they're arguing. So it means those people are arguing from certain underlying beliefs. Now, in research, we also have these broad churches. What are those? There are people who are interpretative, there are people who are critical, there are people who are positivist, there are people who are constructivist, there are people who are critical realist. All these are called paradigms. And before you can conduct any research, you need to choose which of these actually fits your study. Then I'm going to show you how these are related to others. And then from once you choose that you are an interpretativist, you then have to choose a research approach. A research approach, there are usually three research approaches. Either you go qualitative, either you go quantitative, or either you go mixed. Now, usually the paradigms should be linked to the approach. For an example, if you say I'm a positivist, you are likely to choose quantitative research approach. Positivists, they believe in quantification, the use of numbers, and therefore your research approach will be quantitative. If you say I'm interpretative or I'm critical or I'm constructivist, you are likely to be qualitative, right? So it means there must be a link between the paradigm and the research approach. And then the design simply means how the data or the study will be conducted, either in form of a survey, generic qualitative or questionnaire or action research or phenomenology or ethnography. These are the designs. These are the designs. So when you are going to conduct building a house, you've got to have a plan. And that plan is what we call the research design, because it exactly shows you how the building of the house will be carried out. So there are three different components: the paradigm, the research approach, and the design. They are all linked. And then you will come to the other parts of the research methodology, like the population and sampling. Who will take part in this study and how many of them? Data collection and instrumentation is how will the information be collected? By interviews or by focus group interviews, by document analysis, by survey or by questionnaire? And then again, how the data will be analyzed, either by discourse analysis, descriptive statistics or inferential statistics, or content analysis. So there are different data analysis. And very important, the data analysis method must link to the research paradigm, the approach, and the design. Because you can't say I'm a positivist and I'm using quantitative, and then you're going to use discourse analysis. It will not work. So there must be a link in terms of how you're going to analyze data from any study. And then also very important is that in your proposal, you must show us how you are going to ensure the ethical considerations. For an example, how will this study not harm the participants? How will you protect the individuality, confidentiality, anonymity of participants? How will you ensure that the participants are not influenced negatively by your study? This is what we mean by the ethical considerations, and therefore you have to indicate this. And then also the reliability and validity, as well as trustworthiness. Why should we take this study serious? How are you going to ensure that there is internal reliability and validity, and also there is trustworthiness, that this study can be replicated in another context, this study can be generalizable in another context, this study is systematic and robust? These are all things that you have to mention here. And then very important is that I want to talk about this alignment between the research paradigm, the research approach, the research design, the data collection and analysis. So if you choose to be a critical researcher, and then your approach will be qualitative, a research design will be phenomenological, and then your data collection will be interviews, and then your analysis will be, for an example, content analysis or discourse analysis. All these things must be related. They must talk to one another. They should not conflate. They should not conflate. This is what we call a theoretical conflation. There should not be a theoretical conflation. So therefore, they have to be analyzed. They have to be aligned. So now, this is what is important about the proposal, and I think I've covered the key aspects of the proposal, and therefore I will take some questions if there are questions. I think this is my last slide. The last slide is that, okay, let's look at the technical presentation. These are some of the most important things that I think you're going to ask. Please write in a simple language and avoid jargon. What is a jargon? Jargon is using a relatively unknown concepts from the dictionary. Do not do that, because the panel members are not interested. We don't use a dictionary when we read your proposal. We want to understand what the proposal is saying. So use simple language and avoid terms. At least 8 to 10 pages of the proposal will be enough for initial submission into admission to the doctoral program. 8 to 10 pages, that's enough. Don't write a Bible or a big document. Nobody has got time to read that. Use double spacing so that it is readable. I would give my proposal to somebody with a very good English to read and correct the English grammar. If the panel is reading your proposal and is riddled with a lot of grammar mistakes, I'm afraid they might make some judgments against you, and you might not be able to go into the program. I usually say to people they must use the Times New Roman and then with the font of 12. Do not use all these other fancy fonts. Use the standard Times New Roman with 12. It's usually a norm. And then make sure that you check your references at the end and make sure that only the references that were used in the proposal appear on the list. Don't put a long list of references to impress us if they were not used in the proposal. That will make you fail. So make sure that all the references that in your reference list or the bibliography are the only ones that were used in the text. Okay, thank you.
Michael, thank you so much for your presentation. There is one question. Could you please quickly answer this question? Okay, what is the difference between cover letter